Hey, welcome to the first layer.
It works.
It works. It went from our timer to our cameras, which is awesome. Hey, welcome everybody to the first layer. My name's Richard. You know that guy. His name's Brian.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
This is your weekly Saturday night live stream. We're back to Saturday nights where we should be in our regular time slot at 7 p.m. And we are talking all things 3D printers. We're taking your questions because this is Ask for Help. And if you've got questions with your 3D printer, we're here to answer them for you. Now, we don't know everything, but we do know most things. And we strive to find the information when we don't know what we're talking about. So we have better information. Now, you can see we've got a little bit of a different setup here this evening. We've got some...
Just a slight one.
Just a little one. We improved our background here. You can see we have some proper shelves now. We've got some printers in the background, which should be working very well. We've got a timer that you guys saw at the beginning that I worked very hard on putting together, and we've got some new pages, as it were. But the one thing that we still have...
Super Chat.
We still have the Super Chat, so if you've got a question tonight, by all means, if we answer it for you, please feel free to use a Super Chat. Every little dime that comes in through the door helps us. Even nickels help us. See, I got a nickel right there. Nickels help us as well. Not wooden nickels, but nickels. We got a lot of people in the chat room tonight. My lovely wife, Geraldine, is over on our social media tonight, and she will be sending social media questions from YouTube right here on the screen, so all you guys will get to see that. Maybe my wife can pull one up right now, and she can just send it to us.
No, I can't.
She can't, she says.
Because I clicked my button and I got myself out.
She screwed up. She closed the window.
Uh-oh.
Let's see if she can get back in.
Oh, I'm not stupid.
Oh, yeah. See, I knew this was going to happen.
Welcome. You know what? We're just playing with this vMix social thing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, to be honest. And, of course, they didn't have any Black Friday sales, so we're not upgrading our license. So,
all right, there's one from Mika Henry. I'm sure Jerry can get that one in for us.
Just a second, I just got updated.
She just got updated, she says. Hold on.
oh no, not system updates.
Do you see the one there?
I sent it to you already.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, I did.
No, you
No,
didn't.
we didn't get any updates on screen.
No.
Hey!
It's got
No,
a
was that
little
you?
orange
That was me.
circle. See?
You put it
Well-
into the queue, honey. You didn't send it to me.
That's what I meant to do.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
Well, maybe we'll... Okay, there we go.
He says,
I can't read it because it's backwards on my teleprompter.
He says, I have a problem with my SD card slot on my Ender 3. It's broken, so I have to stick something in with the SD card so it'll stay. Is there something that I can buy or somewhere I can buy a replacement board? Absolutely there is.
Oh, yeah.
You can buy a replacement board just about anywhere now. Find somebody online. You can either get it directly from Creality. You can get it from Amazon. You can get it from GearBest.
Pretty much any
Yeah.
like local retailer too. Most companies that sell Creality printers should have those boards now. You can also go to the E3 boards if you want to experiment with some newer features. But if you're just looking for a point-to-point drop-in replacement, then the Creality, I think the last version was it 1.1.5?
Yeah, I think so.
Yep. And if it's an older version than that and your printer makes a lot of noise, the 1.1.5 board actually has silent steppers on the board.
Correct.
So it's even quieter.
Yeah, I'm going to give you guys kind of a top-down view of what a traditional board looks like. Let me just go to that. And there we are. So on the screen now, we've got an older Creality board. This is the 1.1.4. Now, these boards, I'm not a huge fan of. I don't like the Creality boards. I think they're just not built very well. I think there's better boards out there, like the Big Tree boards. So here's where you're having the problem. In here, there's a little spring, and it's right on this side, right here. when you put that SD card in. So that little spring, if it disengages or gets dislodged somehow, you are not going to be able to click your SD card in there. So that's something to watch for. If you put your card in upside down and force it in, chances are that's what's going to happen.
And just, from my point here, it's the exact same with any of the boards. So when we go to an E3 dip in this example, it uses the exact same SD card. I'll see if I can move it into the upper frame there. It's the exact same micro SD card mount as the Creality board. In fact, they're all common and manufactured this way. I'll see if we can zoom it in. And if we can flip it to the side, you may or may not be able to see that spring in there. I don't believe you can. It's a little too out of focus there. But yeah, when that spring goes, honestly, I could tell you could repair it, but it's actually going to be cheaper at this point to just go and replace the board. And as Richard showed with the 1.1.4 board versus these E3 boards, which is really cool, they have the exact same layout. So they actually screw in at the same point, and they actually give you a few more ports in addition to the 32-bit boards. So there's a few options there, depending on how in depth you want to go.
Super chat.
Hey, thanks to High Tech Redneck for the $5 super chat. We do really appreciate it. You don't have a question for us tonight? Wow.
No, I guess not.
There we go. And look,
give it time. I'm sure there'll be a question. Yeah, there you go.
There we go. We even got them up on screen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We really appreciate that.
Now that I've spent some time with vMix, the program that we use to produce this show and produce our other streams as well, it really we could really do some cool things we're discovering. Now all I got to do is get the Stream Deck set up properly, and then we'll be good to go.
Greg R was just saying about that last question. You can add a Raspberry Pi with Octoprint and not use the SD card. That is also true. Just bear in mind that by default, the SD card will be faster when it comes to sending data, because when you send across USB, it has to process every command. And you want to make sure you buy a good quality USB cable, because the printer's not smart in saying, hey, I was expecting more commands, send me more commands. If you hiccup the wrong way and that cable disconnects, your whole print shuts down. So it's very critical. Sure. I found a lot of people end up breaking their USB ports purely because they started going and doing Octoprint full time. So just keep that in mind, because all the Creality boards, the USB ports are in the worst place possible.
It looks like we had Mingda send the Hammer of Doom over to us, and we do appreciate that from Mingda. Yes, we are Canadian. We are Canadian.
Yes. How's about that there, eh? I get my got my President's Choice sparkling water. Good for the kidneys.
I have my Calgary water.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that one will purge your kidneys.
Hey, Brad Pond's got a question here. He says, recently been looking into an Olsen Ruby nozzle. He says, I see their high temp version, but it says click to pre-order, which opens up a new email form. Are these not cut yet, or just big demand? I don't believe that they are out yet.
No.
They have not been released to the public, so it is in a pre-order state.
And it sounds like their system's not set up for pre-orders, so they're trying to do email orders and all that. Now, we don't talk much about the Olsen Ruby because, at least in my experience and what I've seen, it's a very overrated product. Namely because the Ruby itself is only affixed to basically the point of your nozzle. It's not all the way through there. And so I have seen situations where the Ruby became dislodged, and then it's junk, basically. Yep. And you're talking $120. I've purchased everything in between. Honestly, I've gone through the steel, through the hardened steels, through those, what are they, carbide?
Yeah, tungsten carbide.
Tungsten carbide, which are $70, $80 a pop. They all perform evenly. The only one I would say to move away from, if you can, is move away from a brass nozzle. The brass nozzles are cheap, sure, but they do wear down. If you go with a stainless steel, all of that wearing just goes away, and then after that, it's just gravy for heat transfer, basically.
So Joey Bork says, I have a question on the Ender 3 V2. For some reason, I keep getting a little layer shifting at the same spot every time on my belts. All my belts are tight. My E-steps are calibrated. I can't figure it out. Sometimes what happens is it's all about speed, my friend. And if it's happening in the same spot, chances are that you're on the Ender 3 especially, that one side is just drooping when it gets to a certain point up on the Z-axis. It's just drooping and it's causing that problem for you. So I would double check that and make sure that all of that is taken care of for you.
Square up your eccentric nuts. Take the time, move your Z gantry all the way to the top, all the way to the bottom. Make sure it moves freely using its own motion there. And then, if you are finding it sticks in spots, it could be a warpage, or it could just be it needs a little extra lubrication.
Yeah, there you go. Peter Reynolds, our good friend here in Calgary, says, how often should you change the brass nozzles? You shouldn't have to change your brass nozzles very often. Brass nozzles will last... Here, let me go to my overhead here. I just happen to have a hot end right here. So brass nozzles should last a fairly long time. When they start to wear down, it's usually because it's grinding on the bed and it's hitting the bed far too much. And as this heats up, the softer it gets, as we know when it comes to brass. So you can actually deform these nozzles fairly easily if you haven't got your bed leveling and tramming set up correctly. And if you have to change it, I don't think I've changed a nozzle on any of my machines for almost a year and a half now. I think that's where I'm at. I don't think I've changed it for about a year and a half now.
Yeah, with brass nozzles, all you got to know is that brass is cheap because it's a very soft metal. That being said, when you're heating up filament, the temperature itself will not cause the brass to ever soften. However, the two known causes I've seen for brass nozzles requiring replacement is, number one, putting something abrasive, and that's a very loose term, I know, but putting something abrasive through it that will cause the hole to widen over time, which may result in a gradual, basically looks like lines start getting a bit thinner, or it almost looks like you've configured the wrong nozzle size, so you see more blobbing at the ends of the movements. Or you've once or twice driven it a bit too low and dragged it across the bed, or it's dragged across a print at one point, and the end of the nozzle starts shearing on itself, either shearing inwards to make it appear like a partial clog, or shearing outwards where you're going to hear it basically scraping along your top layers and so forth. Now, as Richard said, I've got a few Creality machines that actually are still running on their original nozzle over a year later, the original brass one, and I have no problems whatsoever. But if you are in that zone, sometimes replacing a nozzle can make things worse. So make sure it's your nozzle. A good thing to do is try to get it powered down. You don't have to remove the nozzle, but just take a look at the tip of the nozzle. Have a good brass brush that you can just lightly run across it. Don't go too heavy, or brass on brass will cause abrasion. Yep. And just make sure that the hole is looking round and it's not looking kind of beveled or swollen. If it's looking like that, you're probably fine. Just go print a calibration cube just to make sure everything's still looking okay.
Yeah, I would definitely do the same thing as well. If my levels are a little too hot, somebody please let me know, because it looks like I'm peaking over on my end. So
yeah, I can't tell on my side. My regular mic is actually mounted above me right now, which is why it might sound a little different. Let me know if it sounds good or not.
Kirk Newton, I believe that's Kirk Newton. He says, what nozzles do you recommend for Ender 3? Brass is fine. Brass is fine. Unless you're going to change the entire hot end, then I would definitely just stick with brass. Unless you want to get into something that's a little more abrasive, like filaments that have glow-in-the-dark, or polycarbonates, or even wood filament, then I would probably go to a hardened steel nozzle. But just remember that when you do that, let me just cut back here. When you go to a hardened steel nozzle, even though this is still not all steel, you could run into a problem, because remember that your Bowden tube goes down right to here. And when you're getting into the temperatures necessary to print those types of materials, you are causing damage to that Bowden tube. So that's something to keep in mind. And we got a super chat.
Super chat.
$10 from our good friend Peter Reynolds. He says, I just got my new CR-10 V3 with direct drive, easy setup, making great prints. Awesome.
That's great. I'm so glad to hear it.
Yeah, me too. I think that's amazing.
Now, just talking on the nozzle one here, I just pulled up spool3d.ca, which is our local guys here, just to give you an idea of nozzles out there. I believe the Mark 8 is the equivalent to the Creality one. Is that correct, Richard?
Yes.
I haven't looked in a while there. So you can see price range, and I'm not going to talk about actual pricing here, but the reality is a brass nozzle is really only minorly cheap, like a little bit cheaper than just going with a stainless steel. Now, when you start getting into the hardened steel stuff, or as we can say, like Olsen Rubies, the tungsten carbides, which are $70 Canadian by example, they're great nozzles, don't get me wrong. But if you're not upgrading the rest of your hot end, if you're not getting a titanium heat break or an all-metal heat break, if you're not getting a good copper block, you're really just spending money on a feature that you'll never use. It's I'm trying to think of the right analogy here, but basically you're putting like chrome wheels on a Corolla. You know, it might look a little nice, but is it going to offer you any performance difference? Absolutely not. I guess like ceramic brake pads, you know, you might get a perk out of it, but chances are you will receive the same treatment with the lower one. So myself, I always say get yourself at least one stainless steel nozzle or try it. Because with the stainless steel, it does have slightly different temperature properties. And so your old print settings may not work. If you're finding you're grinding through brass nozzles and all you print is things like PLA, or you do some abrasives like glow in the dark and all that, then just get yourself a stainless steel nozzle. Save yourself the headache.
Yeah. Daryl Watts, do you have any tutorials on how to use Cura? We have lots of tutorials.
Absolutely, and it's hard because it's always changing. I mean, I'm running Cura 4.8 right now.
Yeah, me too.
And you know, a couple of YouTubers manage to jump right on it every time. They have time to do the entire beta test and have all their content ready for when it goes stable. We haven't been doing much with it. The only thing I can say that's majorly changed in Cura over the past, I think the last video we did was 4.2.1.
I think so, yeah.
And the major feature changes really is support blocking got built in, and then tree supports moved out of beta and actually went to the proper support area. But if you are looking at just your basics of Cura, some of our older videos, even though they say for an older version, are 85 to 90% similar to the new version of Cura.
JC says, I'm getting an Ender 3 V2 Wednesday.
Oh, nice.
I want to go to direct drive for ABS and flexibles, etc. What hot end would you recommend? First and foremost, I'm not going to recommend that you go to a direct drive hot end for ABS or for flexibles. You don't need to do that. What you need to do is upgrade the extruder. So what you want is a dual gear extruder. You can get them. I think they're about $25 or $30 for the dual gear extruder.
Something minimum. Cheap enough on Amazon, yeah. The one I use has just been fine.
And
let's see if I can pull it up.
To be perfectly honest with you, I think that's the better way to go. Now, remember, when you're printing ABS on an Ender 3, you are going to have that in an enclosure. If you don't put that into an enclosure, then you're going to run into issues whereby you're going to get lifting, you're going to get curling, you're going to get separation of the layers, just because the filament is shrinking way too fast. It's cooling way too fast. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, get yourself one of these dual gear setups. You can just look up dual gear on Amazon and you're going to find a whole bunch of different products. I think I paid $25 Canadian at the time, and obviously they're sold out right now. The other thing to do is if you're going to be printing those higher temp materials, I'm going to say anything higher than 240, get yourself a Micro Swiss hot end. The V2 doesn't use the E3D, correct? I haven't actually looked at that model.
The V2,
I think it's still using.
Yeah, it's not using the E3D.
Yeah, I think it's still using the same block. I'd have to. It's been a while since I've looked at this Ender 3 V2. Richard got one to review. I haven't touched one. So yeah,
it uses the exact same setup as the previous version.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's just hidden under a new shroud there, I guess, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if that's the case, yeah, get yourself the Micro Swiss hot end. It's all metal. It's really nice to work with, and you know it's going to allow you to print whatever you want. Technically, it goes up to I think 300, and I don't think there's really any materials on the market for consumers that goes past that at this point.
So Fine Gorblant, he says, I'm new to 3D printing, have a Creality CR-X, but struggling with dual printing. Can you make a video about printing 2 colors with that printer? The settings for Cura and so on. There's actually a number of videos out there, but yes, we certainly can do a video on doing dual printing with a single printer or print head
with the mixing nozzle. I think we actually did publish that video, did we not, on the CR-X back in the day?
Oh, CR-X, yeah, we did.
Yeah, the CR-X, yeah. If you go back into our video archives, we did a video. The plain and simple answer is with the mixing hot end, Creality's default is to purge 100 millimeters of filament per layer on the color change. And so when we printed a benchy, basically 3 times the weight of the benchy was in a purge block. So it was very wasteful on the material. So just a general tip when doing dual nozzle printing, dual color printing on a mixing nozzle, is you want to keep your vertical layers as minimal as possible. You don't want, the higher you build it, the more purge volume that block is going to need.
I had to turn back on my mic.
Yeah, I was going to say, you turned yourself off there.
I did, actually. I did. Because I was asking my wife to bring up a previous question that we missed. Asking if we have any experience using the mold feature of Cura. I'm a beekeeper and make candles from the wax. I'm interested in making molds with my printer. Now, candle wax will melt PLA. I will tell you that. I don't have any personal experience with the mold feature in Cura. I do want to try it though, but I won't try it until I can do it in a higher temp plastic like PETG or ABS, or even something even higher than that.
I haven't tried that feature myself. Normally what I would do when I was doing my mold making was I basically took it into, I think it was Mesh Mixer at the time. I created a big old block, and then I did a Boolean subtraction to create my negative mold, which is basically what Cura is doing. I will see if I can set one up here as an example while we move on to the next question, and then I'll see what I can show on screen here.
Okay, we've seen this question already. So, by Fine Gorblant. There we go. There's a new one. He says, this one's from TSWG, the rocket program. He says, I have a CR-10 and the nozzle screw port broke. Any you recommended, or should I get a stock one? Okay, so what you did, you said your screw port broke. Now,
I think he over torqued a nozzle and snapped it off in the block, which we've all done. I hope we've all done, because I've done it a few times, and I feel kind of bad right now.
I've actually only done it once. So if you're talking about this port here, this is for your thermistor. This is what holds your thermistor in. This holds your heater cartridge. If you snap this off, or you snap that off right there, then what I would recommend is that you just get yourself a new hot end for 25 bucks and be done with it.
Yeah, pretty much. It's not worth your time. I have tried to use bolt loosening things, and the fact is anything you do to that block is only going to cause your threads to get all misaligned, and it will actually cause gaps and potentially more clogging. Just throw the bugger out. You can actually get new blocks fairly cheap. You don't have to rebuy the entire hot end.
Daryl Watts, is there a direct drive for the CR6 SE? What would you recommend? In all honesty, I've not seen the CR6 SE. I believe that the hot end in that thing is the same as every other Creality machine on the market. So,
in which case, it makes it nice and easy, I guess.
Yeah, it makes it nice and easy because there's several direct drive kits out there. I'm very partial to the kits from Micro Swiss. They have a direct drive version out, so that's the one I would go with. That would be my first choice.
Okay, let's see. Can we show the... No, we can't. Open too easy. Got any more questions there?
We do. Dominic Versetto is asking, does the Creality glass bed have a coating that wears off? It seems like mine doesn't work as well as when it was new. Glue stick is now a requirement. Yes, it does wear off. That particular coating that's on top is very much like the Anycubic grid coatings that are on them. To be perfectly honest with you, if you've been cleaning it with alcohol, stop it, because alcohol takes off that coating. It breaks it down, and you'll notice that when you lift up your rag after cleaning off the bed, you'll notice that the rag has a little bit of a yellow tinge to it. That's because it's picking up that coating. My recommendation for cleaning that off is not use anything that has a solvent in it, just a little bit of water on your rag, and that should be fine. And that's the way that I would go, Dominic. All right. So,
okay, I'm just trying this Boolean subtraction here, and I'll let you guys know how it works.
Joey Borg says, do you guys have any opinions on the Ender extender kits?
Love them. Mark is... oh, well, I mean, what Mark's doing is the same thing I did. It's a really cool modification. It's just a matter of you have to understand what the limitations of the mechanics of the machine are. My Ender, I've got it up to 500 millimeters tall, but I haven't extended the beds at all. And for that size machine, it's great. But my CR5 or CR-10S V2, which I modified to be a meter tall, lost all stability at 600 millimeters. So within the limitations. Now, the 400 kit, the 500 kit, or the 300 kit and the 400 kit, I mean, they're fine, but you're basically just rebuilding your Ender. So I personally, without seeing Mark's price on that kit, I would probably be a little bit more hesitant on going up to the bigger bed size. I would probably say buy a better printer, like an Ender 5 that has, what is it, the Ender 5 Plus that has the CR-10S build plate size, but in a cube factor. Yeah, that's a pretty darn good machine. And the Ender out of the box is great, so you might introduce a lot of new issues. But Mark knows his stuff. He's been developing it for quite a while, and I'll give it my thumbs up. The quality is there, but just beware. Again, it's like any modification; your mileage may vary.
From Pab TV says, can the Creality glass surface be refreshed? No, it can't. Once it is worn off, it cannot be refreshed. So your options are this: flip it over to the clean glass on the other side and use glue stick, or get yourself another one. Now, this is the problem I found with any of these beds that have that grid on them, that raised grid. If you run your finger over it, you can feel that it's actually raised. And the idea is so that it grabs the bottom of your print and keeps it stuck to the bed. Now, the downside to that is, just like anything, it's going to, over time, wear out. And you can push that process faster if you're using solvents like alcohol or acetone or anything that has a solvent in it. You can actually ruin those beds pretty quickly. So I always recommend that if you're gonna use those beds, go over it with just a cloth with a little bit of water on it and clean it that way. Don't use any Windex that has ammonia in it. You can use ammonia-free Windex. You can use some of the natural products as well. Again, spray it on your rag. Don't spray it on the bed itself, and then wipe it down. That would be the best way to go in that instance.
And don't use hand sanitizer. That little amount of glycol in there actually buffs the surface, makes it smooth. So you'll never be able to get anything to stick to it again. I know it's cheap right now versus isopropyl. Don't use it.
There you go. There you go. Hey, we're halfway through the show already. Man, we've had a lot of questions.
That's great. I love to get some questions,
And Jerry's doing a great job over there on her side of the room. she has her own little side of the room now, and she's following along very diligently, and she's doing a great job. Everybody, give my wife a big thumbs up in the chat.
Ding ding.
Tell her she's doing a great job.
No, I will not make you cookies.
Oh, come on.
She says, no, she will not make you cookies. Jerry, Geri. That is correct, Tim.
Now, this is, if you couldn't tell from all that background grumbling here, I'm still waiting for Mesh Mixer to process this mold. So let me tell you a little bit about mold making. We work with a couple of different people for mold making, and for myself, I love the smooth-on products. If you're looking at mass producing something, this is the way to go. So they've got a couple different mold making materials. It's basically a liquid thing. So what we'll do in the future, we'll be covering this a little bit more, is creating a base block for making your mold and then making your positive mold out of 3D printing and being able to cast it indefinitely. So if you're doing, this stuff on average is about, to make one mold is probably going to cost you about $50, $60 Canadian. But you can then afterwards you can cast it out of any sort of resin. You can make it much more solid. You can do any material you want in the books. You can even make certain food grade ones too. So if you are looking at making molds, especially with PLA not being flexible, this is the way to go because you're going to get a urethane rubber coating at the end. So we'll cover a few of those products in the future. I just haven't had a chance to make any molds, what with the chilly winter upon us. This week is going to be like 10 degrees here, so maybe we have a chance.
Here is a mold. This is a typical mold. This is a silicone mold. This is designed for making 28 millimeter miniatures, wall pieces. So if you're doing terrain for something like Warhammer or any other tabletop game, this comes from our friends over at HurstArts.com, as you can see there. I've had these molds for, oh gosh, I don't know how long. Look, there's dirt on this one. I've had these molds, and I have about $1,000 worth of these molds. And they're all silicone, and they're great. Yeah, you can cast plastics in them. You can cast plaster in them. I typically casted plaster in mine. But at the end of the day, it is something that you can do, and now printers will do that same thing. So, something to keep an eye out. They won't print flexible molds. Well, that's yet to be seen too, because you could probably print flexible molds using TPU.
Yeah, you could. I would say it's probably not even worth your time. You're going to get a much better mold out of actually printing your base in PLA or PETG, doing your finishing and all that. Remember, it's not like an end-all be-all, but I will be doing something very interesting with TPU soon. Stay tuned on that. Of course, I've got a couple other things on my blog that luckily no one's harassed me about yet tonight, but I am doing some work with some TPU coming up. And Gregor, can you print cookies? Actually, I've seen a few processes where you can print cookies, but
yes, you can.
It is not using your FDM printer. Let's put it that way.
Well, that's not necessarily true either.
Well, no. What I'm saying though is when I say FDM, I don't mean I mean a Creality machine. I've only seen one person attach one of those little injectors that make it act like the chocolate machines. And I think I saw a video out of the UK where a restaurant did fully 3D printed meals, and frankly, it just looked like slop coming out of a nozzle that was printed in a cool fashion.
Fine Gorblant said, I did ask a question about printing TPU.
Let me see if I can find it there, but sorry about that.
We do apologize, but, we work these kinks out.
Okay. Oh, sorry. So here's his question. He said, I asked the firm where I bought my printer if I could get a direct extruder for my CRX to print TPU, but they said it was not necessary or not available. Does that mean I can't print TPU? No, you can print TPU with a Bowden tube setup. I have my Creality machine behind that primarily does. it works fine. The key is the extruder assembly. And just to make sure we're talking about the same thing, we're talking about the geared mechanism that is upstream of the hot end where your Bowden connector connects in at. The reason you want a dual geared one is because TPU, and I think I actually put away my roll finally here, it's floppier than, you take your imagery however you want. It's floppier than that. So if you go and have filament and you are pressing it through that extruder assembly, I wish I had more film on hand, but if you're pushing it through there and it's ultra flexible, you have to think, what is preventing it from going like this? What's preventing you from jackknifing your filament just like you're jackknifing a trailer? You have to guide it in evenly. And the single gear extruders that come with all the Creality machines, they have a bearing on one side just to apply additional pressure against the gear itself. But as a result, now you only have pressure and gear movement on one side of the filament, giving it the opportunity to bow outwards in the gap between the gear and your Bowden tube. And so these dual gear ones not only give you pressure on both sides at an even rate, but the metal piece kind of curves in towards those gears to provide almost no wiggle room, so your filament only has forward to go, not up, not down, not backwards. It will only move into your hot end. Now, does that mean it's going to prevent all sorts of runaways? Absolutely not. It happens to all of us. TPU, you got to print it slow. You can't do any massive retractions. You just kind of have to let it dink away at 20 to 30 mils per second tops. And once it's done, it's done.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Thoughts? This is from Auto Drop 3D. He says, thoughts on any of these fancy new belt-based 3D printers?
We get to ask this every week now, don't we?
Every week we get every week. Neither of us have one. I won't lie. I want to play with one, but here's my problem: is I've only seen one belt machine, and I've only seen it with about a month of service life. I want to see what happens to that belt after 6 months or after a weird print sticks on it, because if you look at all the videos, the print does come clean off the bed. But that also raises the question, then what's holding it to the bed? And are they just printing really slow? What happens if you start getting nozzle or filament just running away? And the autonomy of it is cool. Don't get me wrong. It is a neat concept. But, it also required rewriting the slicer and all that. I don't think it's integrated into Cura as of yet. It's still a third-party modification of Cura. So it's very beta. It's very early on, and I do want to see it at a 3-month cycle and see if that belt requires a lot of servicing. Because remember, if your filament is not sticking to that surface, well, you're going to lose your whole print job, and, it's just another point of failure. But it does look cool. I would love to try one. I haven't seen any in Canada yet. Well, our good friend Tim over at DeWitt 3D will be receiving one fairly soon. And when he does, we'll get a chance to go and have a look at it. Hammer of Doom, and what happens when the belt jams? That's a great question. What happens when that belt jams on those things? Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, the end-all hope, the one thing I've been seeing that I haven't had a chance to look at, EDC 4MA said White Knight printers have been out for a year. Yeah, they've actually been around for a while. Really, we're talking about the Creality variant right now, Naomi Wu's version, if you want to call it that. Everything for this technology is new. So to compare the Creality one to the White Knight would basically be comparing a Creality to a Prusa.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's Creality is going to come in with the budget-friendly model, and we're going to see if it can hold up. As I said, I am definitely interested in one. I do want to play with one. So hopefully Tim has a good experience with it, because it only takes one printer to ruin an entire design concept to people.
Hammer of Doom is saying he asked, there's no load sensor on the belt drive.
Yeah, well, you couldn't. You can't have a load sensor on it because your tension has to be at absolute maximum at all times. And again, what's going to happen with belt sag? How are you going to know if that exists, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It is a cool concept. It's much more automation focused. And remember, at the end of the day, it's best designed for people who need to mass produce either long objects or many small objects. And how how many instances have you individually had to deal with where you had to print more than 10 quantity of a product? Now, Tim here, he runs a business, so it's going to be very valuable for him to mass produce items. But for hobbyists like us, a lot of the models we do are single shot details. And
that's true.
It's, it's going to be a neat concept. I also haven't seen, how the belt control works with direction. I think it just continuously moves on the Z, but it will be neat. As I said, I just haven't had the time of day to get the details on it yet.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those things that we're going to have to wait and see. And when Tim gets his, I'm very interested in going over and seeing how it works, how well it produces prints. We've seen through the various videos that are out there, we can see some potential issues with it. But Z-Hop doesn't work. I'm hearing from Auto Drop 3D. He says Z-Hop doesn't work on those printers, so that's very interesting to know. Really would like to know more about that. So
I think it's that the belts can only go one direction.
Yeah, I think so.
Like not mechanically. I think it's software wise. So, and again, this is getting into mathematical concepts here. But instead of going on a layer by layer, and you can see your layer lines and all that, now your slicer is slicing at a 45-degree angle, and your entire concept of supports has to change completely. So. It's it is a very cool concept. Don't get me wrong. It's and seeing comments saying, Greg R saying it's only a PLA only printer. That kind of sucks, because the kind of stuff that you want to print big, you want structural integrity on it. At least say it can do PETG and ABS. And if it can't do those two, you're really limiting the functionality of that thing to basically, as we were just discussing earlier, mold making. You're just using a rough draft. You go and put your molding clay on there, or you do your sanding and your finishing, and you make a rough buck, basically. Because PLA, I love it. Don't get me wrong. But when it comes to actual practical uses, it's really a garbage filament compared to what they have out there.
There's a question here about direct drive, and I forgot who it was from.
JC asked if you got a link for the asking for the link. JC, let me know where you are in the comments, like which country, and I'll find an Amazon link for you.
Let me just go to this article that I found. This is on all3dp.com. This is the Ender 3 Pro direct drive, so you can see how they've set it up. This is a whole article on everything that you're going to need to setting up a direct drive, step-by-step guide, what you're going to have to print, and so on and so forth to convert your existing printer into a direct drive. And again, it's not much to doing. You're just moving some things and printing off some stuff. So I would go and check this out if I were you, and that's at all3dp.com, and it's the Ender 3 Pro direct drive.
Yeah, so actually, you know what? That's the exact one I did back on my video.
Oh, there you go.
Let me see if I can actually pull up that video for you guys. And this is going back a little ways there. The direct drive on that one, it does work fine. It's a 3D printable one, so you don't need to buy any new parts. But just bear in mind, wherever you mount your filament, it's going to have to route to there nicely. And if you put it on the top, you're just adding extra vibration.
There you go. Fine says, I think I have to buy another printer if I want to print TPU. I don't know that you have to buy another printer. I just think you have to make some modifications to the one that you have. JC, you're very welcome.
There you go. There's a blast from the past there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that one there I had, you can actually see the direct drive down there. Do I have a close for this? I'm trying to remember. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, it's as you can see, it works completely fine. It's just a matter that you want to print it out of a stronger material. If you have it out of PLA, it's going to be if you print it out of PLA, it is going to soften all over time, in my experience. So you want to. That one was printed out of HIPS because I just so happen to have a reel sitting around, but PETG or ABS would be preferable for that part.
There you go. I'm waiting for my wife to pay attention over there.
I'm just looking at the
She's
things
fallen
there.
asleep in the last 15 minutes.
Tim said, I highly recommend upgrading the bed leveling springs on the Ender 3 Pro and V2 printers. Now, it varies printer to printer because the early Enders that I got ended up having those real cheap stainless steel springs. But the yellow ones that you can get on Amazon and that come with the CR-10S and above, they are great. They're fine springs wise. They will give you that extra tension. The Creality ones that came with the Ender 3 by default, they just don't have the compression ratio, and when you raise the bed to the height it should be, it wiggles around quite a bit. So yeah, buy some new springs if you can afford them.
There is a question here from ST. Says, I guess I missed the conversation about PETG. Ender 3 can't do it at all. No, the Ender 3 can do it. You just really, to get it to do it correctly and without it clogging, you're going to have to upgrade the hot end. You're not going to upgrade the extruder, but you are going to upgrade the hot end. And if you don't, you're only asking for trouble.
And I mean, that being said, I'm going to give the counter argument here because I do know a few people that do print all these things like PETG regularly on their Ender 3 stock hot end. Your limitation is that you have to keep your PETG at 235 or lower. If you set it to 235, you will be fine without warping that Bowden tube, at least in the short term. However, because 235 is so low, you really need to slow down your prints there to get a flow without clogging it or having back pressure in the nozzles. So, I mean, that being said, I always tell people to print PETG over ABS because PETG doesn't require an enclosure. It won't warp like ABS, but you do have limitations if you have a Bowden setup and you do not have an all-metal hot end.
We have Turtle Bumblebees asking, he says, I'm having a squeaking sound coming from my Prusa Mini when there are fast, short moves. Can't seem to figure it out if it's the belts or the bearings or something else. Any way to narrow it down? I'm going to tell you right now, it's in your bearings because they're moving too fast on those short, fast moves. And the bearings that are in there, don't get me wrong, they're still good bearings, but they do, because of the material that they use to lubricate them, they get dust in them. And when they start to get dust in them, they start to squeak. And there's no getting around that. You can get in and try and clean them out, but it is fairly difficult. You may just have to live with it or change out the bearings.
And also be sure to check those eccentric nuts.
Yes.
I believe the Prusa one there does have those. I've had a few printers where in order to get it, I had to bind it all down to hell. And then I was able to print for 7-8 days fine, and then started hearing this scratching noise, and it got worse and worse. And then I popped it off and found out I had actually worked my way right through the bearings. So bearings, remember that these wheels are a fine balance of enough pressure to prevent wiggling, but just enough pressure that it won't cause them to bind and apply pressure to the bearings on the inside. At the end of the day, the bearing is simply a metal-on-metal interaction with some kind of fluid to help aid that motion and prevent wearing. If any of that is out of balance, you're going to have all sorts of issues.
There you go. JC says he ordered the all-metal Micro Swiss upgraded springs and a dual extruder. Thumbs up to you, my friend. Thumbs up
now,
to you. Now,
just so you know, dual extruder, goes in nice and easy. Updated springs goes in nice and easy. Micro Swiss, follow our instructions to a T. Make sure you torque it appropriately. Make sure you preheat the block accordingly. And JC, one thing just to give you a heads up on, have a look at your block right now and determine if your heat cartridge and thermistor are caked in with any excess filament on there. If so, there's a good chance you're going to wreck those things pulling them out. So you may want to order an extra heat cartridge and thermistor. And I only say that because they're so darn cheap. You should always have a spare on hand.
There's a question there, and I'm sure it's going to come up here right away from Peter Reynolds.
Come on, Jerry.
There it is.
Jerry. There we go.
There we go. What do you recommend as lubricant for Z-rods? We recommend that you use the silicone. What is it? The Silicone 123?
I've used white lithium grease myself.
I've done
just
it too.
because I like that because it's not in pure liquid form, and with a Z rod there, it's just gonna kind of stick in its place and lubricate. The downside with white lithium grease, it collects dust just like anything else.
Yeah.
So for the best performance with your Z rods, I always recommend take some paper towel, add a little bit of isopropyl alcohol to it, and just run it over the rods before you relubricate. Get all the old gunk out of there, because the white lithium grease will help kind of cake that stuff onto the rod, and that's when you end up getting binding. Now, you really don't need to use a lot either. If you're finding you need to use a lot of lubrication, which I hope is not a problem for anybody here, if you don't want to apply too much of it there, you need to make sure that Z rod is straight. So while you're working on that area, give it a chance to travel all the way to the top and all the way to the bottom, and make sure it's not wiggling. If it's wiggling, it's off center.
All right, so SEO says, I had some adhesion problems on the edges of my build plate, and I'm thinking about using glue stick, hairspray, or heat gun. Any thoughts? Do not use hairspray. Do not use your heat gun. Use the glue stick. Yeah. Pretty simple, easy question.
And if you're having... Yeah, exactly. Use that, and make sure your corners are a bit level. You may need to prop it up a little bit with some tin foil.
Yep. From Greg Ari says, I have a micro Swiss extruder. It can be PETA to feed filament. I'm not sure what he means by PETA, but I know what he means. Paint in the okay.
Area behind us.
Yeah. Sometimes it just doesn't want to go into the Capricorn tube, even with a sharp tip. She's finicky. I'll tell you what's probably happened there is that if it's at the extruder end and not at the hot end, now we've got two different things here. There's a micro Swiss extruder and there's a micro Swiss hot end. Determine where it's going. Probably what's happened is that the tube itself, the inner diameter of those Capricorn tubes is just a slight smaller, and sometimes it does take a little bit of wiggling to get it in there. You can flare it out just by taking a hobby knife like this and just putting it inside the tube and just flaring it out just by rotating the edge of the knife on the inside of that tube where it meets the extruder.
Honestly, I don't even go that far. I take something like a pen or a skewer, because that's nice. That'll create a nice little taper there. If you are having issues feeding it through, what you got to understand is you're trying to feed. A lot of us cut sharp ends to kind of guide it in, but you need to make sure that the end of your Bowden tube is flat. And unfortunately, I didn't bring it up with me, but if you're buying any Bowden tubing, you should be buying a Bowden tube cutter, because otherwise the material is it's too soft. It will cause a micro ovaling to it, and it will catch forever on everything. Richard, do you have one nearby?
I had one. Oh, yes. I did.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah, those things, it's basically a sharpened razor blade, but it does such a clean cut on Bowden tubes. You get one of these. Don't stick your finger in it, please.
Don't do this.
As a male, I know it's been very tempting. I've been wanting to do that, but I know what's going to happen, so don't do that. These things are like $10. They're not very expensive at all.
And the blades themselves, you can find blades like that, so you can replace them. These are a godsend when you're cutting any type of Bowden tube. You basically put the Bowden tube into the crease down here, and it'll cut it straight every time. So long as you have put the Bowden tube into it straight, it'll cut it straight. And to be perfectly honest with you, you should have this in your toolkit regardless. And what do you recommend for an upgrade for the Bowden tube? This is from ST, and in all honesty, ST, I prefer the Capricorn tubing myself over the regular.
Is it XS, which is not as restrictive than the XR, I think it is? There's two different types of Capricorn. Yeah, there's two different
types of Capricorn. There's a light blue one and a dark blue one. The light blue one has the same inner diameter as normal Teflon tube. The dark blue one has a smaller, it's only 0.9 of a millimeter inner diameter. So it's perfect for when you're doing flexibles. They don't bind up in there.
Now, and that's the thing, is if you're going to go with flexibles, that darker blue one's the way to go. XS is the dark one. TL is the lighter one. Now, I run TL on almost all my machines purely because it's a bit more tolerant, and the temperature of the Bowden tube itself actually goes up to 300. So, tip and trick of the week here is if you want to print PETG and stuff, and you really are unsure about going to that all metal hot end, you can get the Capricorn TS, drop it right into your machine, and because it's rated up to 300, you can get to that 245, 250 without any risk of warping the Bowden tube. Now, the reason we talked about that tool, that cutting tool, is because whenever you replace a Bowden tube on a non-all metal hot end, that end has to be completely flush and flat and pressed up against the nozzle inside the heat block. If it's not, then you're going to get all sorts of clogging. You're going to think something's wrong with your hot end. It's really just that connection point. So if you're going to spend the money on Capricorn tubing, buy the appropriate cutter. It will save you tons of headaches.
Brian Franklin says, I just missed that one. Can you go back to that one, honey?
No, got the one that I sent you first.
Okay, well, we'll go to this one first.
Yeah, I've got a Black Friday. Oh, okay, you got the other one up.
Okay,
I was trying to catch it on the feed there.
Hello, I followed your tip last week to use the device manager to find my motherboard. The board is detected by Visual Studio and still having problems even after adding the port command. That's from Carl Ball.
That's interesting because the actually Visual Studio has made it one of the easiest ways to actually detect which device is considered an AVR Dude compatible microcontroller. Take a screenshot of what's happening when you're programming it and post it to our Facebook group, and we'll have a look and see if there's something popping out weird. Because if you're getting a connection error when talking with AVR Dude, do we recall which board he was trying to program?
I can't remember.
Was that a 2.1? Because you may actually be missing a bootloader. So.
Brian Franklin says, I got a Black Friday Ender 5 on the way. I'm printing bed supports and PETG. Any other suggestions for that printer? I don't think so. The Ender 5 is, in all honesty...
Why are you printing bed supports for that machine?
Probably because of the way that it cantilevers.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I got an Ender 5 behind me. I've never had to do any adjustments on that because the build plate's so small. I'm going to be honest, I don't think you need those bed supports. I think just adjusting your springs and doing a bed leveling, I think the last time I leveled mine was 6 months ago, and it's solid. Now, if you have the Ender 5 Plus, that might be a bit different, but the Ender 5 is really the build volume of the Ender 3, but in a cube form factor. It doesn't require much to keep it level.
3D Obsession is asking, how do you do a PID calibration on the Prusa Mini? I believe on the Prusa Mini you can go into the wizard or the setup in the menu system on the LCD, and it will guide you through how to do a PID tune on the Prusa Mini.
Yeah, I'm just looking up on the... it actually explains what PID actually is. So, according to Prusa, and this applies to, I believe, all their machines here, to perform a PID tuning, starting with firmware 2.0.12, it's an optional procedure which is super easy to perform. It can be found under LCD, calibration, PID calibration. If you don't have that menu, it might be worthwhile to reach out to Prusa. They've got great documentation, honestly.
Because nothing came to questions at the first layer.
There's lots of videos you're going to find out there right now.
I see it up here on my screen.
But it is problematic, truth be told. PID tuning, as a guy who works in industrial control, if you don't understand what it's doing an actual PID tune could cause your machine to become more unstable than it is. But if you're drifting like 1 or 2 degrees, it's not going to matter. If you're drifting 5 degrees, and if you have a something like Octoprint, you're going to see an oscillation. That means your PID tuning is way out of whack. Mm-hmm. So you can try and watch a video, but if I can give you any piece of advice, if you can find the PID tuning parameters, there's a P for proportional, I for integral, and D for derivative. If you can find those 3 parameters, please write them down before you start doing tuning, because then you have something to go back to if/when it goes wrong.
Correct. Luke Murray says, I believe I sent in a question yesterday. Did you receive it? If it didn't come to questions at the first layer, it was probably went to my junk folder if you sent it to Richard at the first layer. Please, please, please send your questions to questions@thefirstlayer.com and we will get them for sure. If they come into my personal email, chances are they're going to get lost and we won't get them on the screen. Very seldomly do I catch questions in my personal email because usually they will go to my spam folder and that empties automatically. So what do you guys recommend for finishing models? This is going to be our last question for tonight because
time travel like 3 months and then join our new channel.
That's a loaded question, fine, because there's plenty of different ways to finish your models. And you can see some models in the background here behind me. Let me just go to my shot here. You can see that we've got some models on the shelves behind me that some of them have been painted, some of them have been finished, some of them have not been finished. There's a variety of different ways to do it. So we have a new channel that we're launching pretty soon called The Last Layer, and we will be showing you all the different techniques for finishing your models. And
that's pretty much that, yeah.
is the last question. We'll be launching that channel very soon, and we're just waiting for some hardware to come in. We're just going to run a little bit over. Speaking of hardware this week, we were gifted some stuff from some companies, and I want to say thank you to them. I don't remember the name of the company, but they sent us an HDMI video capture this week.
For those of you who want to get into streaming and you have like an SLR, we bought the cam links from Elgato when they were $180 Canadian a pop, and they actually worked all right. This one I picked up on my own from Amazon. This one was $20. I think the one Richard has is a little bit more.
No, it's about the same price.
About the same price. This one does 1080p 30 capture, and Richard's one does 1080p 60. So we're going to be trying those out a little bit. I couldn't believe how cheap these things have become. So if you're looking for some HDMI capture, and they come in every brand name in the book. You know, Richard and mine, we opened ours up and couldn't tell the difference. So thank you to the company that sent the one to Richard.
They didn't tell me the company name. Just somebody reached out to me and asked me if I was interested in one. I said sure. And I want to thank DJI because they sent us over a cell phone gimbal. This is the DJI Osmo 3. It's not the Osmo 4. But it came in this lovely package and came with a whole bunch of accessory things. And we'll be using this to get some really cool B-roll for you guys on our upcoming videos that will be coming back on Wednesdays. Now that we are through fixing up this part of the studio, we'll be getting back into doing more of what we are here to do. And that is to bring you the best information that we can on all 3D printing from novice right into intermediate. We're not going to try and get into the expert. Oh, wait, I got to do this.
Super chat.
Super chat.
Thank you very much to 3D Obsession
for
the $5. We do really appreciate it. So we are going to get back into doing our regular Wednesday videos. My wife has set the schedule. I have a day of recording tomorrow, so we'll have new videos coming out very, very soon. And
yes, alterations, it's coming. I have one more SD card to check, and then if I don't have that, I'm going to make it a bit more generic. But yes, that's coming. I will at least take a bunch of photos for you guys. Unfortunately, I got slammed this week with work, and unlike the current restrictions in place, I'm still obligated to, which I shouldn't complain about, but I'm working full time, so my schedule's been a little bit packed here. So please be patient with me. I'm not going to deliver it to you if it's garbage.
There you go. With that said, everybody, thank you very much for all of your questions tonight. We are still trying to fine-tune our new look and feel for our live streams. I hope you guys really enjoyed it, and I hope you like the new look. And we're trying to just level up our production value a little bit more for you guys all the time. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Everybody, thank you for the super chats that you gave us tonight. They really do go a long way into helping us do what we've done. Please keep safe, stay home, wear a mask, and we'll talk a little bit more about COVID things that you can do on your 3D printer very soon. But for now, we're under lockdown here in Alberta now. It's a state of emergency here. Wherever you are, I hope that you're safe. I hope that your families are safe. And please, again, wear a mask when you're in public. That's all I can say. And
order all that Black Friday filament because it's going to be a long winter, folks.
Order a lot of filament. And we will see you guys on Wednesday with a brand new episode, because I have to record one tomorrow because my wife is making me. She's standing over me with the whip. So she says I have to do 2 videos this week. And
oh, wowza.
Yeah, so I have to record 2 videos this weekend. Yeah. So until we see you guys next time, remember that the first layer is always your foundation to a great print. Again, thanks for joining us tonight, and we will see you in the next one. Bye. There we go.